Welcome to the show. When China's President Xi Jinping addressed the UN General Assembly earlier this week, development and aid for Africa was a major focus of his speech. One of the countries keenly interested in what President Xi had to say was Nigeria. It is Africa's most populous nation and its largest economy. It is also fighting the insurgent group Boko Haram. I sat down recently with the country's President Muhammadu Buhari to discuss these issues. Mr. President, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Just a few days ago, China's President Xi Jinping made a major speech to the General Assembly. A large portion of that speech was devoted to the developing world, specifically Africa. What was your assessment of that?
Yes, well, it's very impressive, and I think it's a serious undertaking which Nigeria started benefiting from. For example, we have agreement with Chinese government in infrastructure, especially railways, from the south to the north, and they are again willing to help Nigeria in agriculture. So I think as far as Nigeria is concerned, what the Chinese president said, he meant it. We are already benefiting from it as a country.
Broadly speaking, how would you characterize the relationship between Nigeria and China?
Well, Nigeria is in a very difficult position now. We have Boko Haram in the northeast, which declared alliance to ISIS, and that makes things much worse for Nigeria, because we thought they have got a way of getting more resources to continue with their anarchy in the northeast, and terrorism, and recruiting young men and women, and use them to attack churches, mosques, schools, marketplaces, motor parks, and in the south we have abduction of people and demanding of ransom, and there is oil theft. So Nigeria has a very, very serious security problem.
And are you getting help from the Chinese to combat that problem?
We are, in a sense of we have to give them what we need so they can help. For example, within the week I was sworn in, I was invited by G7. I went, and I was asked to brief the meeting. All the heads of state and government were there. Of G7 I did, and we sent our requirements. I came here to United States. President Obama was very sympathetic to Nigerian case, and already we are receiving American aid in form of military hardware, training teams. The same thing with Britain, the same thing with France. So I believe China will gladly join them. But as you know, traditionally our military was being trained in the UK and in the United States. I too have been trained in both countries. So that tradition is continuing, and now we have asked them to help us, and they are already on the ground.
I want to move to some of the other specifics in his speech. I mean, one of the things he said that he would like to see a bigger voice for Africa in international governance in places like the United Nations. He would like to see a permanent peacekeeping force in Africa. He would like to see more money going to African development. How does that resonate with African countries, especially one like Nigeria?
Well, as far as Nigeria is concerned, we believe the United States is very serious. As I said, as far as Nigeria is concerned, again, they are already physically on the ground. What they said in the about the United Nations, Nigeria is now in the Security Council, and Africa is trying to make a case that the traditional members of the Security Council, United States, Russia, China, United Kingdom, France, we feel that it's high time after 70 years for Africa to get representation. And by number of people and the economy, we feel with all humility, Nigeria is the most qualified.
You have said that you will strive to enhance foreign investors' confidence in Nigeria. What are your plans?
Well, the plan is that we'll be as transparent as possible. For example, I told you I appeared before G7, told them about national security problem and our problem on infrastructure, especially power. Nigeria has a lot of resources. We have oil, we have gas. Our problem is the extraction and transmission. We already have some of the infrastructure, but then we have the main problem, which is of security. The militants in the south are still sabotaging installations, blowing up installations and sabotaging pipelines and siphoning product from the pipelines.
You mentioned security several times. You said in your speech that some of your priorities are to defeat Boko Haram, that's the radical Islamist group, as well as rescue the Chibok girls who were kidnapped by rebels. Tell us more about those priorities.
Well, firstly, when we came in, when I was sworn in, 29th of May, what I did was to change the military hierarchy. All service chiefs were changed, and then the new ones were asked to quickly reorganize and redeploy the troops. And then the tactical headquarters of the operation should move to Maiduguri, which is the state capital of where Boko Haram is most prominent. We are already, as I said, Britain, United States are involved in retraining our troops, and we are again receiving some equipment, especially armored vehicles and so on. And physically on the ground we are making gains, and Boko Haram are surrendering in good numbers, and we have the problem now of trying to separate the hardcore Boko Haram from the ones that were forced in and let them be assimilated back into the society.
Is this part of what you described as a robust strategy on taking on Boko Haram?
It is, because it is realistic. Nigeria has the capacity with the cooperation of the international community, especially, as I said, G7, to come and help us. And we establish a good relationship with our neighbors. Within the week I was so in, I went to Chad, I went to Niger, later I went to the Cameroons and to Benin Republic, and under the auspices of Lake Chad Basin Commission that comprises these countries I just mentioned, we have agreed on a multinational task force, and each country is asked to dedicate a number of troops and deploy them, so that by the end of the rainy season, which is by the end of the year, we will be able to move, well-coordinated move against Boko Haram.
You held a bilateral meeting with China's President Xi Jinping here in New York. What was on the agenda?
Well, the agenda mostly is economic. I told you how the problem, especially in the south, of the militants sabotaging installations, especially oil and gas installations. And those are the installations that we depend on for generating power and transmitting it. China is willing. It has no limit. It's willing to help Nigeria as much as Nigeria can articulate its requirements.
Mr. President, a completely different kind of cooperation, and that is something that you've talked about, and that is to promote cross-cultural cooperation between Nigeria and China. And we understand that many Nigerian schools are now teaching Mandarin.
teaching
Mandarin, the Chinese language?
Well, communication, I think, is very important. Understanding of languages and cultures other than one's culture will give him a wider view, of the world itself. And China was about 1.4 billion people, and the way their economy is surging forward, and that of China and that of India, I think if Nigeria program to train people to speak Chinese and Indian, I think is in line with what the future entails for developing countries, especially of Africa.
How do you see the relationship develop in the years ahead?
Economically, China is becoming in a very big way. I spoke about the railways from south to the north. I spoke about the infrastructure, especially power, roads, and security training. China is capable of giving Nigeria all these, just on the asking. If Nigeria is slow, or this government is only 4 months, it's because already we have a cultural relationship in terms of training of the military, in terms of British and American, which I told you I was both trained there, and people are still coming here to American War College and other institutions, as well as the British. So it's not easy when for 50 years we establish a relationship of training, especially of the military. You can't switch overnight. But the question of economic help with the technology available, for example, hydropower. China has built one of the biggest hydropower stations in the world, if not the biggest. We have got them lined up in Nigeria. Rehabilitation of them will already have, and the new ones. And China is willing to come and help us. And we are very, very receptive of those suggestions.